JJ, I am so happy to be with you. We're here in Nashville right now, and I grabbed you and was like, "Can we do a podcast?"
And of course,
together?
I was like, "Yes, please, now."
And when I saw you yesterday, it was like, "I want to hug you. I can't wait to see you." I am so pumped to be chatting with you. You are the master of all things story. Do you actually have a doctorate in storytelling? Is that how it works?
My doctorate is in communication, but my emphasis was in narrative theory and story. So my undergrad, I just studied communication, and then my master's thesis is actually in theology and the arts. So it's a study of theological principles in movies, specifically was my emphasis, but television, film, and art, music. And then my PhD was in communication, but narrative theory. So I actually studied Lewis and Tolkien. I went to Oxford and was in Oxford studying and studied movies and all of that. And so, I've dug into story.
And that's totally your jam. So I talk with business owners all day long who will say things like, "Laura, I'm posting online, I'm sharing my offer, I've got my website, I'm doing all of the right things, but it feels like no one is paying attention."
Yes.
And this is a really common thing at the moment. And I think what can happen is a lot of business owners can go, "Oh, it's because the algorithm has changed, or it's because of this external factor that I can't control." What would you say to someone who feels like what they're sharing isn't getting the cut through? From a story perspective, what would you be saying?
There's a couple different things. I think obviously there are some of those things that are true. I think it's less true than we want to admit, right? So it's really easy to make the algorithm the villain in the story. Yes. And I do it all the time. And there is some truth to that, but I don't think it's the full truth. Yeah. There's a principle in narrative theory that's called narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is the idea that when we see ourselves in a story, we actually transport ourselves into it. So so if you've ever been in a movie and you've been scared and jumped, you've experienced narrative transportation. If you've cried, you experience narrative transportation. You've put yourself in the story. And the research shows that the higher levels of narrative transportation people experience, the higher levels of influence that story has on them.
Interesting.
Now, here's where it gets kind of fun. So I'm getting a little nerdy. We're going deep right away, right? We're getting a little nerdy. So there's a number of ways that they measure narrative transportation and the influence of story. But two big ones are, first, can people see themselves in the story? Yep. Second, does the story make sense? Does it have what they call fidelity and coherency? Meaning, does it follow the rules of story? And the research shows when you can make people experience that, they have higher levels of narrative transportation, higher levels of influence, meaning the story actually changes their hearts, their thoughts, and their actions. And this has been proven to be true in movies and films and books, also in marketing and messaging. So this is now getting to your actual question here. So what I hear from a lot of leaders and businesses is we put out this great content. I'm always on Instagram. I'm following the rules of the algorithm. What I would argue, or maybe I guess the question I would ask is the story you're telling about you, or is it about your customer? Yeah. Because if your customer cannot see themselves in the story, they will not experience narrative transportation. The other thing is, are you following the rules of story? Do you even know the rules of story? And if you don't, then people are not going to experience narrative transportation. Yeah. So your message might be confusing. It might be overwhelming. It might take them into a story that you didn't even intend them to be in. But if you can actually dial in your message in a way that makes your story, whatever you're talking about on Instagram, more about your customer story than your story, you're actually going to cut through the noise in a more powerful way, and people will experience narrative transportation.
Okay. So this is, I'm like, okay, I'm processing. Yeah. I'm experiencing narrative transformation right now. Two questions, two follow-up things. The rules of story, I want to get to that. Yeah. But first I want to think about when you say, when you're sharing your story, if it's about, let's say an example is I'm sharing a story about when I started my business and I struggled with this and my origin story, for example.
Yes.
That story is technically about me.
Yes.
How do I make it about them?
So here's the thing. If you're talking to people who, let's say you're talking to mothers about a parenting class, and you are telling your story about starting your business and the struggle that you went through to build your business, that is your story and has nothing to do with parenting classes. It doesn't matter what they do not see themselves in that story. However, if you're talking to creatives and entrepreneurs who are trying to build their own business and are struggling with the things that you struggled with, even when you tell, quote unquote, your story, they can see themselves in your story. So that's the thing when I'm talking to very specifically, artists, creatives, business leaders, people want to build business. When you're trying to promote, like if you're putting pictures of your family on Instagram, that's just them getting to know you. That's something different.
Yeah.
But when we're starting to talk about your products and services, what you have to start with is, what are my customers struggling with? And start with that. Really, when I get on Instagram, if I'm going to, so I work with a lot of companies in their marketing and messaging. I help them clarify their message, create great stories for their messaging. If I walk up on a stage, I'm at a conference full of businesses, I do not walk up there and go, man, how about this weather, everybody? Like, I don't do that, right? Like, or I don't even tell a funny story about, like, the other day, my son said the craziest thing. I'm not trying to make them laugh. I'm not doing any of that. I walk on stage and I say this: everybody here wants to grow their business. The problem is you're wasting thousands of dollars on marketing and you don't even know it. The room is silent. You can hear a pin drop and everybody leans in that moment. So I could get up on stage and tell a funny story. I could tell a relatable story even about my child. Doesn't matter. When I start with my quote unquote customer story by talking about their problem, then I have them hooked in the story because they start to go, oh yeah, I want to grow my business. And am I wasting money on marketing? I've opened what's called a story loop. So one of the very first things I would tell any entrepreneur, anybody putting a message out there that's trying to sell something, when you can find a problem that people are experiencing that your product solves, you have a solid story you're starting with. Now, that doesn't always work when you're selling art or when you're selling poetry. I understand that. But what you're doing in those moments is you're actually trying to create a like-mindedness tribe, like if you're selling art or poetry, that people can see themselves. So if I'm writing, poetry, I'm talking about my own frustrations, which is essentially my problem that I'm experiencing, that ideally anybody who wants to buy that book of poems or that poetry, they've also experienced that same frustration. So I'm not talking about my inspiration and my purpose. Like that's what a lot of artists do. I create because da-da-da-da-da. No. That's your story. What is the story that the customer or the audience is experiencing, and how do you tap into that?
Yes, that's so powerful. And I feel like for a lot of people, maybe where they come unstuck is they actually don't know the problem. So when you're thinking about crafting this story, how much weight are you putting on the problem piece, identifying the actual problem? That's
the biggest. It truthfully is, because in story formula, so I talked about the rules of story. All good stories in their most basic form really have 7 elements. So you'll see this. I might ruin movies for you as I talk about this, but there's really 7 elements to any good story. The first is, and think about the last movie you saw or different movies, right? It starts with the first element is a character has to want something. So we meet a character who wants something. Now, if the whole story is just about that character walking around and like they want to win a race and it's just happy, everything's good for them, or in the first 5 minutes they win the race and then they're just happy about winning, it's a very boring story. In order to make the story interesting and really hook us as an audience, the second element of story is the main character has to encounter a problem. This is the hook of the story. If there is no problem, there is no story. It's not interesting. Then the hero, wants something, encounters a problem. In order to overcome that problem, the hero meets a guide, somebody who comes along to help the hero win. This is, in movies, this is Gandalf. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is Yoda. This is Dumbledore. This is the older, wiser person who comes along to help the hero win. That guide then gives the hero a plan. That's the fourth element. There's a clear path forward for the hero to win. So we often hear in movies, what's the plan? Or here's the plan. You'll hear it in like every movie, right? Then there's a moment that the hero is called to action. So they have to either be in or out of solving the problem, that they experienced earlier. So often there is a bomb that's going to go off, a ticking time bomb. You've got 10 minutes to do this. So the hero's got to go, I'm either rushing in or rushing away. And then there has to be stakes in the story for the story to be interesting. Something has to be either won, which is the sixth element, or lost, which is the seventh element. So we have to be able to win. Every movie is like that. The character wants something, encounters a problem, meets a guide with a plan that calls them to action, results in success and failure.
Yeah.
Now, the question you ask is, how important is the problem? If there is no problem, the rest of the story doesn't matter. Yeah. The guide doesn't need to be there. The plan isn't there. The call to action doesn't need to happen. Nothing else happens. So the idea of marketing is really about trying to understand what problem is your audience or your customer experiencing, and how do you speak to that, and how do you help them overcome that?
Yes. Oh, that's gold. Would you say this is something that we create as a macro thing for our business, where it's like, cool, this is my character, this is their problem, I'm the guide, this is the plan. Like, we create that as a macro level. But then in individual marketing materials, are we also doing it in a micro level as well for those 100%. Individual pieces?
100%. Because we all have different audiences, we have different customers, we have different products, often. And so each of those is a different story, just a little bit, not always. So you do have kind of like a macro, say like what goes on your website, what stays there. Yeah. But it also happens in any given moment. Like if I'm at a networking event and I'm with a bunch of marketers, people who own marketing businesses, then I might say something like, somebody goes, so what do you do? Yeah. I want to invite them into a story, because I don't want to just say, well, I'm a marketing consultant. Well, they're marketing consultants, all that. So if I'm talking to a room full of marketers, somebody says, what do you do? I might start with a problem, and I might say, story is a buzzword when it comes to marketing right now. Everybody wants to have a good story. Yeah. But the problem is most marketers are actually telling the wrong stories. So I work at a company called StoryBrand, and I help them develop clear, compelling stories so they can actually reach more customers and grow their business. So what I just did there was problem, solution, which is plan, and results. I pulled 3 elements there. Now, the problem I brought up is story is a buzzword. Most are telling the wrong story. If I'm in a room full of small businesses, I might say a different problem. I might say so many companies are so close to their products and service, they actually have a hard time explaining to their customers what they do in a way that makes people want to buy.
Yes.
I come in and teach them how to use story, a compelling narrative, to create clear messaging so they can reach more customers and grow their business. So whoever you're in front of, you're actually talking about their problem in that moment, not your macro problem.
That is so interesting. And because I've obviously used the StoryBrand framework, and it's like, cool, this is what lives on my website. It kind of is, it doesn't change that much. It's kind of once we've got it, we've kind of got it locked in and we tweak certain things. But I love the example of how you introduce yourself at a networking event, because I'm terrible at that. I'll be like, oh, I just do this, and anyway, forget about it, and like try to like hide. So I think that idea of going, oh, this problem that's like, they're like, yeah, I do know that problem. You're immediately way more interesting at that party.
Yes. And here's the thing that you bring up right here, which is actually kind of fun for me, because this is something I've really dedicated a lot of my life to, but businesses and leaders need to understand is that in any story they're telling, if you actually want to move people, if you want to help people if you want people to experience narrative transportation, you have to be the guide, not the hero.
Yes.
You are the guide in the story. Your customer, your audience is the hero. So you're always thinking, what are they dealing with? What are they struggling with? How am I helping them? What does their life look like? Now, when you go to a party and somebody says, what do you do? And we start to shrink, which happens a lot. We get like, well, it's confusing. It's overwhelming. I mean, it's not a big deal. When we are moving into that uncomfortable and in some ways trying to be humble in what we're talking about, because you're incredible. You've built amazing businesses. So whenever you get shy, you're trying to be a little humble, don't want to be all of that.
Yes. Yep.
Here's what a powerful thing about that I learned in studying narrative theory. The guide is always the strongest character in the story, not the hero. Heroes are weak. So you actually don't want, as a business, you don't want to be the hero of the story because you're weak. You actually shrink. And you will never see in good movies a guide shrink. You will never hear like, Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, if like one of the kids goes, well, maybe we should do this. And Aslan goes, yeah, I guess you're right. Like that, or Yoda, like Yoda's not going to say to Luke Skywalker in any of the Star Wars, like, I mean, maybe, I don't know. Like, no, they are solid, they are confident, and they do not shrink. They're not arrogant, but they show up to help the hero win. And you shrinking as a guide does no service for your hero. And so when you show up in a networking event, and this for everybody listening, and you start to like fumble over your words and get a little shy about it, not only does that not serve you, but it doesn't serve the people that you can help. They need your help. If you really have a product or service or art or anything that you can help that would be helpful for them, you shrinking makes you a hero in the story, which heroes are weak, and you actually don't serve them. Yeah. The way you serve them is with confidence, being a guide, not arrogance, but with strength. And when you understand that the story is not about me, it's about them, you actually get to live out that guideness. And I think everybody wins because of that.
Oh, that's such a powerful reframe, and definitely something I think anyone listening who does the same thing, you shrink or you go into, oh, this is the function that I serve rather than like, this is the mission that I'm on. The people who are so magnetic, they are so mission driven, and they're like, I'm here to do this. Yeah. And the reason I'm here to do this is because of this problem. And you, even as you were sharing your examples, it's like, oh, I'm so interested in that because that's a way more interesting conversation. It's the magic of story. It like makes you lean in. Yes. What would you say to someone who, we talk a lot about empathy, and empathy does feel like a bit of a buzzword. Yeah. What would you say to someone who feels like talking about the problem or talking about the villain in the story makes them a bit of a jerk? Like they're like, I just want to talk about solutions. I just want to talk about desires. I don't want to talk about problems.
Well, if you don't talk about the problem, it doesn't get people to pay attention. That's the first thing. And it's actually the way you control a narrative. So they've got all this other stuff going on in their brain. They're thinking about all these different things. But when you start with a problem, what you're doing is you're inviting them into a very specific story. Yeah. So that's the first thing, is you're getting their attention and controlling the narrative. Then your job as a guide is really to show up with two things. A guide shows up with empathy and authority. So those two things have to go together. And if you think about, like, let's take the movie Hunger Games. Okay, so Hunger Games, Katniss is the hero and Haymitch is the guide. The only reason Haymitch matters in the story is because he knows what it's like to be in the arena. So he has empathy for Katniss, but he also won. So he has authority. Those two things go together. If he's just her buddy, it doesn't work. Yeah. He has to have that authority. But also, if he's a jerk and doesn't know what she's experiencing, it also really doesn't work either. Even though he's kind of a little bit of a jerk in the movie, he's not nice all the time, but you can tell he feels her pain. Yes. And they show that in a lot of different ways. Let's take it into a business model, right? So if I go into a gym and I say to a trainer, I'm here to lose 30 pounds. And that trainer says, oh my gosh, me too. Not my trainer. Yeah. I'm not going to pay that person to be my friend in this journey. I have lots of friends. We can go work out. But I need somebody who needs more than that. Yeah. Now, conversely, if I walk into that gym and say I need a trainer, and a trainer lifts up his shirt and shows me a six-pack and goes, well, get off your butt, fatty. Authority, he's got the six-pack, no empathy, not my trainer. If I go back to that gym, don't know why I'm going back, but if I go back again and I say, I'm here to lose 30 pounds, and the trainer says, I used to be 30 pounds overweight myself, but I've actually figured out a way to like take it off. I've helped 100 other people do it, and you can still eat ice cream. That's now my trainer, right? Yes. Because like they get me, they are like me, empathy, but they also have helped about 100 other people win. They have authority. So as a guide, you show up with empathy. Yes. And it's always empathy for your customer's problem. Whatever they're experiencing, when you can say, I understand how hard it is to run a small business. I understand, or you say, like for you in particular, you help creatives build business. So you say, I understand what it's like to have the passion of and the heart of the creative and also struggle to figure out how to sell that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say that, because it's true. If it's not true, then you're a false guy. You're a villain.
Yep.
But if it's true, which it is, you were a creative. You struggled to figure out how do I like bring all this together to build a business. That's empathy for your customer.
Yeah.
And so it has to relate to their problem. If they don't have a problem, they don't need you.
Yes.
And if you didn't experience that same problem or haven't experienced helping other people with that same problem, you're not their guide. Yeah. So you have to show up with some empathy and go, I get it. I get the struggle. I understand why this is hard. But also, I've helped a lot of other people overcome this, and here's how.
And I think I can even see how this could be useful in a sales conversation, because we need to, in a sales script, it's like, okay, cool. What's the problem? Like, why are we here? Actually, we start with, what do you want?
Yeah. Yep.
What do you want? Why? Like, what's the problem? What's the roadblock? And then, okay, cool. I could be your guide. What does this look like? When training our sales team, I'm always saying to them, we are not doing nice girl energy on these calls. Our team is like predominantly female. Like, no nice girl energy. And what I mean by that is, we can't have empathy without action.
Yes.
And so it can't just be, oh, babe, I'm so sorry. That sounds so tough.
Yeah.
And I can understand and I feel your pain, and then just like
leave it at that.
Leave it at that. It has to have the authority, and it's like, cool, but I'm not going to let you stay there. And here's the plan, and here's why you should trust me. And that combo of the two is so beautiful.
Yes.
And I think probably for a lot of people listening, they might do the empathy part really well, but struggle with the authority line.
And really all the authority is like testimonies, Google's reviews are authority, years of service, company logos of companies you've worked with, media pieces that have highlighted you, anything. Really, it doesn't have to be a lot.
Yeah.
We think like people need like all of this stuff. We need to really promote ourselves. When you put like 1 million pieces of authority out there, you're becoming the hero again.
Yes.
So you just need 1 or 2. Get 2 reviews on your website. Or when you're in a sales conversation, go, actually, I worked with somebody who was in your same spot and they were able to triple their revenue. Right? Like, so it doesn't need to be a lot. And you can even say, I could send you this case study, or I could send you can watch this video that I'll send you. So it doesn't have, it's just dropping a little bit.
Yes.
When I get on stage, nobody knows my marital status. They don't know my religious background. They don't know anything. Because none of that is helpful to them in authority space. What I do drop occasionally is I've worked with thousands of businesses all over the world. So I might say, after working with thousands of businesses, I understand. That's it. That's empathy and authority right there. Or I can say, maybe in the middle of my speech, I can say, when I was working with Microsoft, that's it.
That's it.
Like,
it's a
little thing. Or, I said, so I teach this at Vanderbilt University, and at Vanderbilt, what we understand.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
And those 3 things, if I drop in, I'm a professor at Vanderbilt in the Masters of Marketing program. I worked with Microsoft and I've helped thousands of businesses over the course of a 45-minute talk. That's all people need.
Yes.
I don't need to go into my resume. And in fact, I have somebody else give my bio before I walk on stage. I do not introduce myself as ever. In fact, I refuse to, truthfully. I have somebody else introduce me, because what they're doing is they're giving me the authority. So I'm getting a testimony. I'm getting somebody else to give me authority. Then I don't have to do anything else. Yeah. I'm done.
Yeah, it's like in Lord of the Rings, Gandalf doesn't have to prove he's the guide. It's just,
he just shows up and he uses magic.
And he has a staff.
Yeah.
I love this so much. Now, you are the storytelling guru, but you also do more things.
Yeah.
And you've just launched this podcast. Can you tell people about the vision behind the pod? Because I think it would be really interesting for people here.
Yeah. So I launched a podcast called Badass Softy.
I love it so much.
Which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. But really what is behind it is really this guide mentality. There's a lot of times that I've showed up in places of business. I've been in big rooms with, VPs of the largest companies in the world. And there's a moment often when I show up in those spaces that I feel like I need to puff up my chest. I need to be louder. I need to be more aggressive. I need to be meaner so that I can get ahead in those rooms. And I do not like that game. I don't think it's good for me. I don't think it's good for the world. I don't think it's good for the room. And so there's been a lot of times that I shrink in those moments because I go, well, I know how to get ahead in this room and I'm not playing the game.
Yes.
And what that has often led to me is shrinking in my own guidance because I actually have the ability to make a difference in the world. And so I want to really help people understand that when it comes to leadership and business, you can actually be unapologetically driven. You can be a badass, which in the guide world is authority. Like lean into your authority. Be good at what you do. Be the best at what you do. And the softy part of the badass softy is the empathy. It's that idea of, but you can also have heart and you don't need to actually step on people or be loud or mean in order just to get ahead. And in fact, the research shows that when you combine those two, you actually get further ahead. You accomplish more. There's more profits. There's more growth. There's all of those things, better retention in your, over and over. Yeah. There's like, the list is limitless of when you actually use both of those things together that you change your business, your leadership, the world in a whole new way. So that's really what Badass Softy is all about, is challenging and encouraging people to step into both of those things.
And I love it so much because I always talk about with my members, okay, you can be a badass and you can be kind. And I don't think the two are like mutually exclusive. And so I love that you're kind of pulling those two things together. It's so powerful. And you know what's interesting is we can see it in real time. We can see it in all arenas of life where you can go, oh, that person's got the softy side but doesn't have enough badass side, or they're all badass and no empathy. And so we can see that and go, oh my gosh, like, is that the only way? Yeah. And so I love that you're creating this space and this path forward of, okay, what if we could do both? Yeah. It's really powerful. To wrap up, what would be your like final piece of advice to someone who wants to start leaning into more of this empathy and authority piece in the story?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, say like we started this whole thing, when you're showing up on Instagram, when you're showing up in those spaces where you're trying to reach new audiences, stages, podcasts, speak to both of those things. Always, I always like to start with empathy. And the piece that I always start with is understanding what are the people experiencing and what are they struggling with. And then I start with that empathy. Yeah. So when you're showing up on Instagram and you say, have you ever struggled with this? I get it. Those two sentences set you up as a guide. And that's really where it all starts. And so you'll see this. People who do this effectively is like, even almost saying like, have you ever struggled to lose weight? If going back to the trainer, have you ever struggled to lose weight? Look, I used to be 30 pounds overweight myself. And just telling that story leads with empathy, but then you're showing the transformation, which shows authority. So be thinking in those terms. That a lot of people like to show up on space and they go, well, I'm, Dr. JJ Peterson. I teach at Vanderbilt. I've worked with Microsoft. And they always start with authority. And I go, that's fine. Yeah. But those are not my people. Yes. Those are not my people. I lead with empathy, drop the authority in the story, and really make it all about the people that I'm serving.
I love that. It's the equivalent of the guys that post their Lamborghinis everywhere, and you're like, is this the only way?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not. It really isn't. And if it especially, I think in this new era in that we are in the world, I think there's a lot of, a very famous person recently said empathy is a weakness, and I think that is false. Yeah. And that's I'm not going to say, if you know who that is, you know who it is. But I think empathy is a strength. And 100%. I think those of us who can actually learn to lean into it as a strength versus where it's often seen as a weakness, like that when you care about people, then you're making yourself vulnerable. You're putting yourself at risk. Sure. But the benefits of that for you, for your team, for your customers is exponential.
Yeah.
And there's research behind it that shows that when we are emotionally in tune and we are emotionally aware and we actually bring that to the table, our companies, our teams, they outperform. And I think it's so important to lean into that. And then, like I said, the other part is I also go, yeah, but also if you just sit around and hug each other all the time, you're not going to change the world. Yeah. So let's bring both to the table and make a difference.
I love it. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Where can people check you out? Where can people check out the pod as well?
So the podcast is on Apple and Spotify and YouTube at Badass Softy. And then my personal Instagram is Dr. JJ Peterson, and my website is drjjpeterson.com.
Love it. Thank you, JJ. It's been a pleasure.